So if you break your arm, right, an X-ray gives you this perfect binary precision. It's either broken or it's not.
Right. Yeah, you can literally just point to the jagged white line on the film.
Exactly. The doctor points to it and you know exactly what the reality is. I mean, it's clean, it's objective, and honestly, it's incredibly comforting.
We definitely love visibility. We love categorizing our problems like that.
We really do. But the moment you step out of a medical clinic and into the world of building something entirely new, like whether that's a tech startup, a new department at your company, or even just a side hustle, that X-ray machine just completely shatters.
Oh, absolutely. You are operating entirely in the dark.
Totally in the dark. Yet somehow founders and managers still sit down and write these massive 50-page business plans as if they have this high-definition X-ray of the future.
Yeah, plotting out 5 years of revenue projections based on what? Absolute guesswork.
It's literally just guessing. So today, we are throwing those business plans in the trash. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a sledgehammer to the glossy, kind of mythical Silicon Valley fairy tale.
And honestly, that fairy tale is arguably the most destructive force in modern business.
Right. The whole lone genius thing.
Exactly. It's that seductive narrative of the lone genius in a hoodie fueled by, like, energy drinks who just dreams up a unicorn company overnight.
They write some flawless code in a dorm room and wake up a billionaire.
Yeah, it whispers that triumph is just this matter of destiny for those born with a magical blend of grit and innate genius. But it completely ignores the actual mechanics of how successful businesses are built.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is dedicated to unpacking the lean startup methodology by Eric Ries.
It's such a crucial framework.
It really is. We are going to explore how entrepreneurship is absolutely not some magical art form reserved for prodigies.
Far from it, yeah.
Right. It's a rigorous, testable science of sweat equity and what we'll be calling validated learning. And to be clear to you, the listener, whether you are trying to build the next massive smartphone app or reinventing a century-old manufacturing process,
or just trying to navigate a wildly chaotic project at your day job.
Exactly. These principles form a literal survival toolkit. We are going to teach you how to hack the scientific method into your loftiest goals.
And more importantly, how to avoid spending years of your life building massive, expensive castles in the air.
Yes. So to understand how to build correctly, I feel like we first have to understand why the old way of building is basically guaranteed to fail today.
Right. Well, the traditional business playbook relies on this really monolithic sequential planning.
Like the classic waterfall approach.
Exactly. You conduct a few months of market research, you lock your engineering team in a basement for 2 years to build a massive, secretive product, and then
you launch it with a multi-million-dollar marketing blitz and just pray the public buys it.
Yeah, basically. But that strategy relies on a foundational assumption that the market is static and predictable.
Which it never is. It's like traditional 5-year planning in a modern startup is like plotting a cross-country road trip by drawing a straight, permanent line on a map from 1950.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. It completely ignores the fact that the highways are currently being rebuilt, new cities have popped up overnight, and halfway through the trip, your car might literally need to turn into a boat.
The environment is just too volatile. And, Eric Ries actually learned this lesson the hard way through a deeply painful personal failure.
Oh, man. Yeah. Over a decade ago, right?
Yeah, Ries and his co-founder were those invincible 20-somethings. They built this college student-to-employer platform, and on paper, they did everything by the traditional management book.
Right, they checked all the boxes.
They had stellar team dynamics, they used the most cutting-edge technology of the era, and their market timing fell completely serendipitous.
So they possessed every ingredient that a traditional MBA program tells you will guarantee success.
Precisely. But when the dot-com crash hit, their funding just vaporized overnight.
Poof, gone.
Ries actually describes this tragic comic, almost cinematic scene of him and his co-founder standing drenched in a New York downpour, screaming at each other on the sidewalk.
Oh, wow, like a movie scene.
Yeah, screaming over whether to pivot the company or just let it perish, while their startup's bank account sat completely empty.
That's brutal. And the devastation wasn't just financial, right? It was a profound psychological crisis for them.
Oh, absolutely.
But wait, so you're saying their engineering was flawless, their team was great, but they still went bankrupt. How does that happen if the product actually works?
Well, the product functioned perfectly on a technical level, sure, but it was applied to the wrong universe. They built a product that absolutely nobody wanted to use.
Oh, no. So all that work.
They spent months pulling all-nighters, arguing over the color of buttons, and optimizing database queries for a platform that solved a problem no one actually cared about.
That is soul-crushing.
It really is. The realization that they had squandered years of human potential, not because they were bad engineers, but because they were executing a fundamentally flawed master plan that forced Ries to question the entire philosophical foundation of how companies are built.
He realized the standard engineering playbook wasn't broken, it was just playing the wrong sport entirely.
Exactly. So he had to look outside of software entirely to find a new playbook.
Right, and he ended up studying lean manufacturing, specifically Japan's Toyota production system.
Yeah, which is fascinating.
Now, quick time out for anyone who isn't a supply chain nerd. When we talk about Toyota post-World War II, we are talking about a totally shattered economy.
Japan was essentially starting from scratch.
Right, and American car companies like Ford were using mass production. They were building massive stockpiles of identical cars using giant, rigid machines because they had the capital and the space to do it.
But Toyota simply couldn't afford that luxury.
No way.
Their survival depended on extreme adaptability. They couldn't stockpile thousands of fenders in a warehouse and just hope someone bought them eventually.
So they had to invent a system based on small batches?
Exactly. Small batches, rapid changeovers of equipment, and a relentless, almost obsessive focus on eliminating waste from the assembly line.
Like a car was only built when there's a specific demand for it.
Right. And Ries looked at those physical manufacturing principles, eliminating waste, pulling from demand, keeping batches tiny, and realized they could be translated perfectly into the invisible, digital, highly creative world of startups.
That translation became the testing ground for his next venture, right? The 3D avatar platform called IMVU.
Yeah, IMVU. But this time, the approach was radically different.
Instead of hiding in a room for 2 years trying to build the Sistine Chapel of software, they basically cobbled together a glitchy, buggy prototype.
Oh, it was a mess.
Yeah.
It routinely crashed people's dial-up connections.
Dial-up, that takes me back. So they slapped a price tag on this absolute mess of a product and released it into the wild.
And the customer backlash was immediate and intense.
I bet.
They had users, like one famously furious woman named Karen from Ohio, literally threatening to mail them her fried computer motherboard because the software was so unstable.
Okay, that is terrifying. Threatened to mail physical computer parts.
I know, right? But the brilliance of that moment, however, was that the furious feedback became their primary asset.
Really? How so?
Well, in a traditional company, customer service would apologize, executives would panic, and engineers would retreat to polish the code for another 6 months.
To fix all the bugs before anyone else saw it.
Right. But the IMVU team didn't retreat. They rebuilt the product live.
Wow. While people were using it.
Yeah. They pushed dozens of software updates every single day while the users were actively logged in, literally watching the environment shift around them.
That is wild. So they stopped treating business as a performance awaiting applause and started treating it like a live construction site.
Right.
Okay, but if traditional planning is dead and just mindlessly throwing buggy code at the wall, what some call the move fast and break things cowboy approach, if that just leaves a trail of angry customers and lawsuits, what is the actual mechanism for moving forward?
That's the million-dollar question. The mechanism requires defining what a startup actually is in the first place.
Okay, how do we define it?
A startup is not simply a miniature version of a large corporation. A large corporation executes a known business model.
Right, they know who their customers are.
Exactly. A startup is a human institution designed to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Extreme uncertainty, so you're basically blindfolded.
Yes. And because you are operating entirely in the dark, your primary goal is not to execute a plan or even to make money in the first month.
Wait, really? Not to make money?
No. Your only actual goal is to learn what works as quickly as humanly possible before you run out of cash.
Learning. I have to admit, whenever I hear corporate executives talk about learning after a massive project fails, it sounds like the ultimate participation trophy.
Right, like, oh, well, we tried.
Exactly. Well, the new app lost $4 million and no one downloaded it, but the team learned so much, it just feels like a fluffy excuse to dodge accountability.
It absolutely becomes a fluffy excuse if the learning isn't validated.
Ah, validated learning.
Yes. Validated learning is the core engine of the lean startup methodology. It is not a post-mortem rationalization for failure.
So what is it, practically?
It is the rigorous empirical process of demonstrating that you have discovered valuable truths about a startup's present and future business prospects.
Okay, so it's data-driven.
It is cold, hard mathematical proof of what moves the needle. And you acquire that proof by testing what Ries calls leap of faith assumptions.
Let's break down those assumptions, because every single business, no matter how grounded it seems, is built on a few massive guesses, right?
Oh, inevitably.
So there are two critical ones. First, the value hypothesis. Does this product or service actually solve a real problem that a customer cares about?
Yes, the most important question.
And second, the growth hypothesis. How will this product spread? Like, will users naturally invite their friends? Or are you going to have to spend a fortune on Google Ads to buy every single customer?
Exactly. And failing to test the value hypothesis early is the most common fatal error founders make.
That IMVU story provides a literal masterclass in this specific type of self-deception, doesn't it?
It really does. So transport yourself back to 2004. AOL Instant Messenger and Yahoo Messenger have an absolute monopoly on digital communication.
Oh yeah, AIM was everything.
The switching costs for a user to leave AOL and join a new chat app were astronomical. You couldn't just download a new app. You had to convince your entire real-world social circle to download it with you.
Otherwise, you'd be talking to an empty room.
Right. So the IMVU team looks at this monopoly and spots what they think is a brilliant technical loophole.
What was the loophole?
Instead of trying to build a brand new standalone chat app and begging people to switch, they decide to build a 3D avatar add-on.
Oh, I see.
The idea was that this software would plug seamlessly into the existing AOL and Yahoo networks.
So you keep your friends, but you get a cool 3D avatar. Sounds smart on paper.
Exactly. The massive leap of faith here, the untested assumption, was their belief that users actually wanted to use 3D avatars while chatting with their existing real-life friends.
Okay. And to execute this vision, the engineering team had to build universal compatibility across all major instant messaging protocols.
Yes, and that is not a trivial task. It requires navigating different code bases, constant connection drops, and incredibly complex interoperability standards.
They spent 6 grueling months building this, right?
6 months of blood, sweat, and tears.
We're talking endless pots of coffee, engineers sleeping under their desks, pulling 2 a.m. debugging sessions just to make sure an avatar's arm waved correctly over a Yahoo connection.
Absolute dedication.
So they finally launched this highly engineered, incredibly complex add-on. They wait for the tidal wave of users, and absolute crickets.
Nothing.
Nobody downloaded it. The tiny fraction of people who did download it never used it twice.
Yeah, and panicked. They started literally grabbing people off the street in Silicon Valley, hauling them into their cramped office, and paying them to sit in front of a computer for usability testing.
Which is such a desperate move. And that is where they met a 16-year-old girl from Phoenix.
Oh, the teenager from Phoenix.
Yeah.
The interaction with this teenager completely unraveled their 6 months of labor.
What happened when she sat down?
When she sat down at the computer, she actually loved the core product. She was laughing, highly engaged, meticulously designing her digital 3D character, giving it neon hair and virtual clothes.
So the product had value? The value hypothesis was somewhat true?
Partially, yes. But then the IMVU team asked her to complete the core action. Click the button to install the chat plugin and invite her existing AOL friends to see her avatar.
And she physically recoiled from the keyboard, right?
She literally pulled back. She looked at these grown software engineers like they were from Mars.
She said something along the lines of, "Invite my real friends. Are you nuts? If this 3D thing is lame or if it glitches, I am going to get roasted by my entire high school until graduation."
That is the exact moment the veil dropped.
Huh.
The engineers had completely misunderstood the psychology of their target market.
Teenagers treat social applications like high-stakes minefields. A single misstep is social suicide.
Exactly. The team's foundational assumption was that people wanted to interact with their real-life friends using avatars.
But the psychological reality was the exact opposite.
Completely backward. Users wanted to use digital avatars precisely to adopt new identities and safely meet complete strangers without risking their real-world social standing.
Meaning every single line of code written to integrate with AOL and Yahoo, those 6 months of grueling 2 a.m. debugging sessions, was entirely worthless.
It was a bridge to nowhere.
They had perfectly executed a brilliant technical solution for a psychological desire that just did not exist.
Which introduces the most urgent operational question for any creator. How do you prevent that? How do you stop your team from spending half a year building a bridge to nowhere?
Right, because nobody has the time or money for that, so what's the answer?
The methodology's answer is the build, measure, learn feedback loop.
Build, measure, learn.
The objective isn't just to build a product quickly, The objective is to isolate your single riskiest assumption, build the smallest possible experiment to test it, measure the actual human behavior, and learn whether to pivot or persevere.
And to trigger that loop, you need a specific type of catalyst. But here's the trap, right? You understand you need to test things fast.
Yeah.
You know you can't spend 6 months coding in a basement.
Exactly.
So you have to launch something immediately. You need to birth what we affectionately call the ugly baby, the minimum viable product, or MVP.
Yes, the famous MVP. Though the term MVP has been dangerously co-opted by corporate jargon to just mean a cheap, half-baked product we released to save budget.
Yeah, people use it as an excuse for bad work.
But that is entirely incorrect. An MVP is a precision tool engineered solely for rapid learning. It is the minimum amount of effort required to complete one full turn of the build, measure, learn loop.
So it's not about the product itself, it's about the learning.
Right. And this requires a radical shift in how we define quality. In a traditional paradigm, the creator defines quality. How elegant the architecture is, how polished the user interface looks.
But in the lean startup paradigm, quality is defined exclusively by the customer.
Exclusively. If the customer does not care about a specific feature, any time spent perfecting that feature is categorized as waste.
Let's use the IMVU teleportation feature to prove how jarring the shift in quality really is.
Oh, this is a perfect example.
Early on, the team knew that users wanted their avatars to move around the virtual environments. Now, if you are a proud software engineer, you want to code realistic 3D walking animations, right?
Of course. You want the avatar's feet to track the floor. You want it to intelligently walk around a virtual sofa instead of clipping through it.
But coding pathfinding AI and walking animations takes immense time and money.
It takes months.
So they hacked it. They created a crude feature where a user just clicks a spot on the screen and the avatar instantly vanishes and reappears in that spot.
No walking, no animation, just poof. Teleportation.
The engineers cringed when they pushed the update live. They thought they were going to be the laughingstock of the gaming community for being too lazy to animate walking.
But the data told a completely different story. The users didn't just accept the teleportation hack, they actively praised it.
Wait, really? They liked it better?
They called it futuristic. They loved that it was faster than the slow, plodding animations in high-end video games. They didn't want to waste 30 seconds watching an avatar walk across a digital nightclub.
They just wanted to be next to the person they were trying to talk to.
Exactly. The cheap, cringe-inducing hack was not a compromise to the user. It was the exact high-quality solution the customer desired.
Okay, I understand the theory, but let's talk about the very real anxiety of launching an ugly baby.
It's terrifying for founders.
It is. If I'm an entrepreneur or a manager inside a respected company and I push out an MVP that is glitchy or literally faked, aren't I risking my brand reputation?
That's the fear.
Right. If I put my brilliant idea out there half-baked, won't a giant tech conglomerate with billions of dollars just see it, steal it, and crush me?
That fear paralyzes thousands of founders. But honestly, it is almost entirely unfounded.
Really?
Let's address the corporate theft fear first. Giant corporations are generally drowning in their own bureaucratic roadmaps, internal politics, and quarterly earnings pressure.
So they're too busy with their own stuff.
Yes, they cannot simply drop their multi-year strategies to steal an unproven, glitchy idea from an unknown startup that has zero market share. It takes monumental effort just to get a giant corporation to execute its own ideas.
So obscurity is actually your armor.
Precisely. Obscurity is a massive asset in the early days. You want to test your embarrassing hypotheses when nobody's watching.
But what about the brand reputation part?
As for brand reputation, you have to understand the psychology of the early adopter. You are not selling your MVP to the mainstream mass market.
Okay, so who are you selling it to?
Early adopters actively prefer an 80% solution. They do not want a polished, finished corporate product. They want the thrill of being first, of discovering something raw, and having a genuine voice in shaping its development.
Oh, so they actually like the bugs.
They will forgive bugs if the core value proposition solves their burning problem.
That makes a lot of sense. To really grasp the MVP concept, we have to look at how wildly different they can be depending on what specific assumption you are trying to test.
Right, it's not always just a glitchy software prototype.
Exactly. If building a quick software hack isn't an option, what do? Take Manuel Rosso and his startup, Food on the Table.
Oh, the concierge MVP?
Yes. His concept was brilliant but incredibly complex. an application that creates personalized weekly meal plans based on your specific family's dietary tastes.
And then it automatically cross-references those recipes with the Whitley sales flyers at your local grocery stores to maximize your financial savings.
Consider the back-end infrastructure required for that. You need a massive database of recipes, an algorithmic recommendation engine, integrations with hundreds of disparate grocery store inventory systems, and a polished user interface.
Building that software would require a massive engineering team and likely a year of runway.
But Rosso and his co-founder chose not to write a single line of code. They utilized what you called a concierge MVP.
Right. What did they actually do?
They went to local mom groups in Austin, Texas, and pitched the idea. They found exactly one single customer, a busy mother named Lisa, who agreed to pay $9.95 a week for the service.
One customer.
Just one. For $10 a week, the CEO and the VP of this supposed tech startup literally acted as her personal grocery boys.
That is hilarious.
They physically visited her at her home, they sat at her kitchen table and took handwritten notes on what her kids liked, down to the specific brand of macaroni and cheese.
Talk about unscalable.
Highly unscalable. Then, the executives manually collected the physical paper flyers from her local grocery stores, manually cross-referenced them against recipes, built a schedule in a basic spreadsheet, physically clipped paper coupons with scissors, and handed her a custom grocery packet in person every week.
The unit economics of that are obviously disastrous.
Yeah.
They were likely spending hundreds of dollars of executive time to earn $10.
Right. But the objective wasn't profit, was it?
No, the objective was validated learning. Through that highly intimate, unscalable process, they learned the exact friction points of meal planning.
They learned what features Lisa actually valued and what she ignored.
They validated the human problem completely before they ever risked millions of dollars building the automated algorithm.
But what if your product relies entirely on complex, invisible technology that you simply can't fake with a concierge service? Like, you literally can't do it manually.
This was the exact problem Drew Houston faced with Dropbox.
Oh, Dropbox. Today, we just take it for granted.
We do. But back then, seamless file syncing across Windows, Mac, and mobile devices was considered a holy grail. You couldn't just fake it by manually emailing files to people.
Right. You had to build deep, complex integrations into the operating systems themselves.
And when Houston pitched venture capitalists, they were intensely skeptical. They told him the market was already saturated with file-sharing tools.
But Houston knew the competitors were clunky and required manual uploading, whereas his vision was a magic folder that just worked silently in the background.
Exactly. But how do you prove your invisible software is a paradigm shift before you undergo the years of engineering required to build it?
You make a movie.
A video MVP.
Yes. He created a simple screencast video of his own computer desktop. He narrated over it, demonstrating how he effortlessly dragged files into a folder and they instantly updated everywhere.
And he didn't just make a dry corporate explainer either.
No. He filled the video with highly specific inside jokes targeted at the Dig and Reddit tech communities, naming dummy files, things like 7 secret plans for world domination.
That's brilliant marketing.
He posted this video to a tech forum to see if people actually desired this seamless experience.
And the reaction validated his most optimistic assumptions. His beta waitlist exploded from 5,000 to 75,000 people in a single night.
In one night. By simply illustrating the potential of the product, rather than trying to explain it in a pitch deck or spending 3 years building it in a vacuum, he acquired undeniable mathematical proof of massive market demand with a 3-minute video.
Then you have situations where the technology doesn't even exist yet.
Like Aardvark.
Yes, Max Ventilla and Damon Horowitz built a startup called Aardvark. The premise was a subjective AI assistant.
So not like asking for facts.
Right. You couldn't ask it for the capital of France.
Yeah.
You had to ask it things like, where is a family-friendly spot near Fenway Park that serves post-game milkshakes and won't be too crowded?
Oh, wow. That requires a lot of context.
The system was supposed to intuitively understand the context of your question, scan your extended social network, find a local Bostonian who likes baseball and has kids, and route your question to them instantly.
Routing natural language queries to the perfect human expert requires an astonishing level of artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and social graph analysis.
Technology they definitely did not have.
So what did they do?
Instead of spending years trying to invent that AI, they utilized a Wizard of Oz MVP. They faked the intelligence.
Hiked it. Hey.
For 9 months, they employed a team of human beings, including a college roommate, who sat in front of multiple computer monitors at 2 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
When a user typed a complex question into Aardvark, the user believed they were interacting with a highly advanced chatbot. In reality, the roommate was frantically Googling the answer, checking the user's friend list, and manually typing a response back.
They were literally the man behind the curtain. And the geniuses, by faking the AI, they learned crucial behavioral patterns.
Exactly. They discovered that users vastly preferred receiving answers via standard instant messaging, rather than having to download a dedicated Aardvark app.
They learned that users valued the source of the answer, like a friend of a friend, more than the pure accuracy of the answer itself.
They mapped out every single psychological pothole on the road to scalability, while their competitors were still just staring at whiteboards.
We must also mention Nick Swinmurn, the founder of Zappos, who utilized a bare-bones MVP.
1999 e-commerce.
Right, e-commerce was still in its infancy. His fundamental hypothesis was that consumers would be willing to purchase shoes online without trying them on first.
And traditional retail experts thought this was a complete delusion. Shoes are tactile, fit varies wildly.
To test this, Swinmurn did not secure massive warehouse space, he did not build a complex supply chain, and he did not negotiate wholesale contracts with Nike.
So what was his test?
He literally walked down the street to local independent shoe stores in San Francisco. He asked the owners if he could take photographs of their inventory.
Just took pictures.
Just pictures. He built a rudimentary website and posted those photos online. When a customer clicked buy on his website, Nick would walk back down the street to the local store, purchase the shoes at full retail price with his own credit card, take them to the post office, and mail them to the customer himself.
As a business model, it is comically unprofitable.
Super unprofitable.
But as a learning mechanism, it was brilliant. He proved the unprovable, that a market actually existed for online shoe sales.
And furthermore, by handling the logistics manually, he learned firsthand about the operational nightmares of shipping, customer service, and the high rate of returns before he ever risked venture capital on a massive inventory.
But here is where the methodology gets dangerous.
Uh-oh.
You launch your MVP, maybe it's a video, maybe it's a bare bones website, and suddenly you start getting data. People are clicking, people are signing up, you feel like a genius.
Right, you see numbers going up.
But how do you know if those clicks actually mean you are building a sustainable business or if people are just clicking out of morbid curiosity?
Okay, this is the realm of innovation accounting, and it requires us to ruthlessly slay what we call vanity metrics.
Vanity metrics are the numbers that look fantastic on a press release or in a board meeting, but offer zero insight into the actual health of the engine.
Think of total registered users, overall app downloads, or raw website page views.
These are what Ries calls success theater.
Success theater, I love that term.
A chart plotting total registered users will always go up and to the right, even if every single new user abandons your application after 5 minutes.
It creates an illusion of exponential growth while masking a terminal illness.
Exactly.
To use a functional analogy, relying on vanity metrics is like relying entirely on your car's speedometer to determine if your road trip is successful.
Okay, how so?
It feels exhilarating to look down and see you're traveling at 120 miles an hour, but the speedometer doesn't tell you if you are heading toward your destination or if you were driving in the wrong direction straight off the edge of a cliff.
That is a perfect analogy. To actually navigate, you need actionable metrics.
Actionable metrics reflect real human behavior and business health. We are looking at retention rates, activation rates, and the absolute cornerstone of innovation accounting, cohort analysis.
Right. Instead of looking at cumulative totals, cohort analysis forces you to track specific, isolated groups of users over time to see if your product changes are actually improving their behavior.
Let's make this concrete. Walk me through how a cohort analysis actually works mathematically, using Farb Nivi and his startup Grocket as the example.
Sure. Farb was this brilliant, award-winning test prep instructor for the SATs and GMATs.
So he knew the market.
He did. He believed the traditional model of sitting alone in a room studying flashcards was outdated. His vision was that peer-to-peer social learning was the future.
So he built Grocket as a highly interactive, multiplayer, collaborative test prep platform.
And initially, his vanity metrics were spectacular. Total questions answered across the platform was spiking. Total registrations were climbing. The team was popping champagne.
But then they stopped looking at the cumulative totals and ran a cohort analysis.
And this is where it gets real. Imagine a spreadsheet. Instead of one massive number of users, you break them down by the month they joined.
Okay, so row 1 is the January cohort. Let's say 1,000 users joined.
Right. You look at column 2. How many of those January users came back in February? Maybe it's some 10%. Column 3. How many came back in March? Maybe 2%.
Oh.
Then you look at row 2, the February cohort. You just released a massive new social feature, 1,500 new users joined. But when you look at their retention in March and April, it's still 10% and 2%.
So no matter how many new features they built, the percentage of people who stuck around didn't budge. They were pouring thousands of new users into a bucket with a massive hole in the bottom.
Precisely. The cohort analysis proved that despite the raw growth in vanity metrics, the product was not actually improving in value for the user.
Faced with this actionable data, they had to discover why retention was flat. They implemented rigorous split testing, also known as A/B testing.
And for those unfamiliar, split testing is when you serve 2 completely different versions of your product to different users at the exact same time. Half the users get version A, half get version B, and you track which group performs better.
So Grokkit tests their beloved multiplayer social study tools against a brand new, incredibly bare-bones feature they called Sprint Mode.
Sprint Mode stripped away all the social features. It was just a solo student staring at a screen, grinding through vocabulary questions alone against a countdown timer.
And the results were a devastating blow to the founder's ego. The data definitively showed that engagement and retention skyrocketed for the users in the solo sprint mode.
The core assumption of the entire company that students desired a highly social, collaborative online study environment was fundamentally incorrect.
The psychological reality was that when preparing for a high-stakes exam like the GMAT, anxiety takes over. Students didn't want to chat. They wanted to put their heads down and grind efficiently.
If Grokkit had only looked at total page views, they would have kept building social features until they ran out of money.
But because the data was actionable, they could swallow their pride and pivot the product to match actual human behavior.
This is why data must be actionable, accessible, and auditable. If the data is incredibly complex, or if different departments are pulling different numbers from different databases, it devolves into a political bloodbath.
Marketing blames product blames engineering, and everyone cherry-picks whatever metric makes them look good.
A phenomenal example of actionable data exposing a fatal flaw is Wealthfront. They began as an online fantasy stock trading game.
A fantasy game, like fantasy football, but for stocks.
Exactly. The premise was to crowdsource financial genius. They wanted to find amateur, mom-and-pop, stock-picking prodigies playing the game, and eventually offer them the opportunity to manage real investment capital.
The initial vanity metrics were staggering. They acquired over 450,000 active users playing the fantasy game.
By all traditional corporate metrics, they had achieved explosive, viral product market fit.
450,000 users. You look at that and think you're going to be the next Goldman Sachs. But then they executed the second phase of their business plan.
Right, the monetization.
They launched their premium service, essentially asking those 450,000 highly engaged star players to upgrade and start managing real, actual money. Do you know how many people out of nearly 500,000 signed up?
14. Exactly 14 individuals converted.
14. That is a conversion rate of 0.003%.
The actionable metric conversion to a paid, real-world service acted as a brutal reality check. It exposed the psychological chasm between gamification and actual financial risk.
The behavioral data showed that amateur gamers found immense joy in taking wild, leveraged risks with digital play money. It was pure entertainment.
But the moment you asked them to invest their grandmother's actual retirement savings based on those same wild strategies, they experienced total psychological paralysis.
The thrill of the game did not translate to the gravity of real finance.
So Wealthfront is staring at 14 users and a massive server bill. This brings them to the crucible of the lean startup, the choice to pivot or persevere.
Now, when most people hear the word pivot, they think of a desperate, flailing company that fires half its staff and suddenly decides to pivot from making software to selling artisanal cheese.
Yeah, they view it as a total failure.
But that is a fundamental misunderstanding, right?
Completely. A pivot is a highly structured, strategic course correction designed to test a new, fundamental hypothesis about the product, the business model, or the engine of growth.
It is not throwing away everything you've built.
And this requires a massive paradigm shift in how we calculate a startup's lifespan. A startup's true runway is not calculated by dividing the cash in the bank by the monthly burn rate.
So what is the runway?
The true measure of runway is how many pivots the company is left before that money runs out.
How many chances you have to swerve before you hit the concrete wall?
Exactly. David Benetti's journey with his startup Vodafone is the ultimate case study in maximizing your pivot runway.
Benetti started with a grand vision, a direct-to-consumer social network for civic engagement. You log in, the system verifies that you are an actual registered voter, and you connect with other activists to discuss policies.
The initial activation rates were decent, but the revenue was virtually non-existent. Something like 1% of users were willing to pay for premium features. The B2C model was clearly failing.
Faced with a dwindling bank account, Benetti executes pivot number 1. He looks at his validated learning. He has a highly engaged network of verified voters.
So he theorizes that while consumers won't pay for this network, political campaigns and corporate lobbyists absolutely will. He shifts to a B2B business-to-business model.
The team spends months building complex enterprise sales dashboards. They get high-level political consultants to sign letters of intent. Everything looks promising until the moment of truth.
The clients ghosted them.
If you've ever worked in B2B sales, you know the nightmare. The sales cycles take 6 to 9 months. Political firms are risk-averse. They love to look at new tech, but they refuse to be the first one to buy it.
So Benetti is sitting there, his team is expanded, the cash is burning faster, and the B2B pivot is a complete bust.
I have to ask, in that moment of terror, how do you know if you are making a smart, calculated pivot, or if you are just throwing spaghetti at the wall out of sheer panic?
That distinction is the essence of a successful pivot. A structured pivot requires you to keep one foot firmly anchored in the foundational data you have already validated while you shift your other foot in a completely new direction.
So Benetti didn't panic and start a completely new company. He anchored his foot.
He knew two things for an absolute mathematical fact. First, his technology successfully verified registered voters. Second, regular citizens possessed a deep, burning desire to have a louder, more impactful voice in politics.
What had failed was the social network interface and the B2B sales strategy.
So with that foot anchored in reality, he swings for pivot number 2. He completely ditches the social network concept.
He strips the platform down to a raw, direct utility called @2gov. It was incredibly simple. A user would pay 20 cents, type a digital message, and Vertizen's backend would convert that digital message into a physical paper letter and mail it directly to that specific user's congressperson.
Why? Because politicians routinely ignore thousands of angry tweets. But a mountain of physical paper mail arriving at their office forces a response.
It was a brilliant synthesis of his validated learning. He abandoned the attempt to build a new social network and instead tapped into existing platforms like Twitter for user reach, while providing a tangible, easily monetizable translation service.
The results validated the pivot instantly. 11% of users willingly paid the 20-cent fee.
The viral loop activated as people shared their sent letters online.
By keeping his anchor in the validated desire for civic impact and pivoting the delivery mechanism and business model, he unlocked massive success, eventually playing a key role in drafting the Startup Visa Act.
Sometimes a pivot isn't about changing the business model. Sometimes it's about restricting your own growth. Take the social network path, founded by Dave Morin and Sean Fanning.
They launched a photo-sharing network, but they hard-coded a seemingly suicidal limitation into the software. Your friend limit was capped at exactly 50 people.
The technology press absolutely eviscerated them. In the era of Facebook and Twitter, the entire point of a social network was massive scale. Who wants to join a platform where you can't accumulate 10,000 followers as digital trophies?
But Path possessed the discipline to ignore the vanity metrics of media hype and focus purely on their actionable cohort data.
They discovered a fascinating behavioral anomaly. Users, particularly demographics like mothers sharing photos of their children, were experiencing fatigue and anxiety on the massive networks.
They didn't feel safe posting intimate moments to an audience of hundreds of loose acquaintances.
Path pivoted their entire brand identity away from the standard massive scale model and doubled down entirely on intimacy and privacy. The 50-friend limit became their core feature, not a bug.
They eventually turned down a $100 million buyout offer from Google because their actionable metrics proved they had captured a highly lucrative, fiercely loyal niche market.
Okay, so you've survived the crucible. You've pivoted your way to a product that people actually want and are willing to pay for. You have achieved the holy grail product market fit.
The dream.
Now what? You can't just keep doing unscalable things like physically delivering groceries forever. How do you actually grow the machine?
To scale efficiently, you must diagnose and mathematically track your specific engine of growth. Startups don't just grow by magic. They grow through specific feedback loops. Ries identifies 3 primary engines.
The first is the sticky engine of growth.
The sticky engine is all about retention. This applies to businesses where the core value relies on the customer staying on the platform for years.
Think of massive enterprise database software like Oracle, or a hyper-niche platform for obsessive collectors of rare vinyl records. Your primary daily obsession is tracking your churn rate, the percentage of customers who cancel their service every month.
Think about the math. If your churn rate is 5% a month, but your rate of acquiring new customers through word of mouth or basic marketing is 7% a month, you are growing.
The growth compounds automatically, much like compound interest in a savings account.
However, if your churn rate rises to 8%, your business will slowly bleed to death, regardless of how many new customers you acquire. You cannot outmarket a leaky bucket. You must pivot to patch the holes first.
Then we have the viral engine of growth. This is the dream scenario where growth is a natural side effect of everyday use.
The classic historical example is Hotmail back in 1996. They had virtually zero advertising budget.
So they simply inserted a tiny hyperlinked line of text at the very bottom of every single email sent by a user. P.S. Get your free email at Hotmail.
The mechanism there is identical to the classic Tupperware party model. The very act of engaging with the product inherently forces the user to pitch the product to their network.
The mathematical metric you must track here is the viral coefficient. It measures exactly how many new customers each existing customer brings in.
If the viral coefficient is 0.9, meaning every 10 users bring in 9 new users, those 9 bring in 8, and so on, your growth will eventually sputter out and flatline.
But if that coefficient is just a hair over 1.0, say 1.1, meaning every 10 users bring in 11 new users, your growth becomes an unstoppable exponential curve.
Finally, we have the paid engine of growth. This is the most straightforward mechanism.
You literally buy your growth through paid advertising, a direct sales team, or affiliate marketing.
This was the engine IMVU eventually relied upon once they found their niche. They purchased cheap, targeted text message ads to acquire new users.
The entire survival of a paid engine dictates that you track two numbers obsessively: the customer lifetime value, or LTV, and the customer acquisition cost, or CAC.
It's pure arbitrage. If a customer pays you $4 over the lifetime of their account, and it costs you exactly $2 to acquire them through a Facebook ad, you have a highly functional paid engine.
You take that $2 profit and immediately pump it back into buying more ads. But here's the question every aggressive founder asks: why settle?
Right, why not do everything?
Exactly. What if I build a highly sticky enterprise product, add a viral invite button to the dashboard, and then dump $10 million into Facebook ads? Can't I run all three engines simultaneously and achieve hypergrowth?
Attempting to optimize all three engines simultaneously is almost always a fatal error for an early-stage startup. It results in operational suffocation.
The metrics dashboards become incredibly noisy and contradictory.
The engineering team loses focus because optimizing a viral loop requires a completely different user interface than optimizing an enterprise sales funnel.
You end up executing three strategies poorly instead of one strategy perfectly. You must identify the single engine that naturally aligns with your product's DNA and push it to its absolute limit.
Okay, so you identify your engine, the math is working, and the money starts pouring in.
This is usually the danger zone where scrappy startups start to get fat and happy.
The founders hire layers of middle managers. HR starts writing 50-page employee handbooks, and suddenly the agile startup is slow, bureaucratic, and terrified of making a mistake.
How do you scale your physical and operational footprint without suffocating the very agility that made you successful?
Maintaining agility at scale requires a counterintuitive understanding of workflow, specifically the immense power of small batches.
Our intuition about efficiency is deeply flawed. Ries illustrates this with a brilliant, mundane story about James Womack, a renowned lean manufacturing expert who was tasked with stuffing community newsletters into envelopes with his two young daughters.
The daughters wanted to execute the task the way 99% of us would: mass batching.
The logic seems undeniable. First, fold all 100 letters, then stuff all 100 letters into the envelopes, then lick and seal all 100 envelopes, finally stamp all 100.
You get into a rhythm, right? It feels incredibly efficient.
But Womack, being a lean expert, insisted on doing it his way. Single-piece flow. He took exactly one letter, folded it, stuffed it, sealed it, and stamped it, completing the entire process before touching the second letter.
They raced, and the father, using single-piece flow, absolutely crushed the daughters using mass batching.
It baffles the human brain, but completing one single unit end-to-end is mathematically faster and significantly less risky than mass batching.
When you batch process, you introduce massive hidden taxes on your time. Sorting massive piles, stacking, transporting half-finished goods, and most dangerously, the risk of mass unrecoverable errors.
That is the crucial part. Imagine you fold 100 letters and stuff them into 100 envelopes, only to realize at the very end of the line that the letters were folded backward and the recipient's address doesn't show through the plastic window.
You have to undo, unpack, and refold 100 units. It's a catastrophe.
With single-piece flow, small batches, you catch that exact error on the very first envelope.
This concept originates from Shigeo Shingo's SMED system at Toyota's single-minute exchange of die.
In the past, changing a massive metal stamping die to make a different car part took hours, so factories batched thousands of parts to justify the downtime.
Shingo re-engineered the machine so they could be swapped in minutes. This allowed Toyota to manufacture small batches of different car parts, strictly based on actual daily customer demand, rather than stockpiling massive warehouses full of parts that might become obsolete.
IMVU took this physical manufacturing principle and applied it directly to software architecture with a practice called continuous deployment.
Most legacy tech companies operate in massive batches. They spend a year coding a giant new version of their software and then push it live all at once in a massive update.
And inevitably, it breaks something critical, and the servers crash for 3 days. IMVU did the exact opposite. They were pushing tiny, individual code changes live to their users up to 50 times a day.
To survive releasing code 50 times a day, they had to build an automated immune system into their platform.
If a developer accidentally pushed a single line of bad code that, for example, caused the Buy Now button to disappear, the automated system would detect the statistical drop in revenue within minutes.
It would automatically yank the faulty code offline, revert to the previous version, and lock the developer's capability to push new code until the root cause was found.
The small batch isolated the damage and prevented a catastrophic company-wide outage.
And it is absolutely not just software that benefits from this. Look at SGW DesignWorks, a hardware engineering firm in Boise.
They were contracted by the military to build rugged X-ray frames used for bomb detection.
The traditional hardware approach would be to spend 6 months running computer stress simulations before building an expensive steel prototype.
SGW treated physical hardware like iterative software. They used 3D CAD software and scrap aluminum to build physical, workable prototypes in just 3 days.
They took those crude aluminum prototypes straight out to the desert to test them with actual Marines in the field.
A sergeant noticed that sand was jamming a specific hinge. The engineers literally redesigned the hinge on their laptops over coffee, machined a new piece, and tested it again the next day.
By utilizing small batches and continuous deployment in the physical world, they delivered a battle-ready product in a fraction of the traditional timeline.
We even see this in the public school system. The School of One in New York completely abandoned the large batch approach of an annual, rigid, one-size-fits-all math curriculum.
Instead, they utilize software to generate daily, customized math playlists for every single student.
If a student grasped fractions in 2 days instead of 2 weeks, the system adapted their playlist for the very next day. They didn't have to wait for the rest of the class to catch up.
Small batches allow systems to adapt instantaneously to reality.
However, adapting to reality means you are constantly unearthing problems. And when a critical system breaks in a fast-paced environment, the immediate human reflex is to panic, find a scapegoat, and point fingers.
To maintain a lean culture, you must replace blame with systemic analysis. This is where Ries introduces the 5 Whys, another foundational tool from Taiichi Ono at Toyota. It is a rigorous method for root cause analysis.
The classic example is a machine stopping dead on the factory floor. The manager asks, "Why did the machine stop?" The immediate answer is, "The circuit overloaded and blew a fuse."
Now, the lazy manager just replaces the fuse. But the lean manager asks the second why. Why did the circuit overload? Answer, the bearings locked up because they lacked lubrication.
Third why. Why did they lack lubrication? Answer, the oil pump failed. Fourth why. Why did the pump fail? Answer, the internal shaft was worn down.
Fifth why. Why was the shaft worn? Answer, because a mechanic forgot to install a metal filter, allowing debris into the pump.
The 5 whys force an organization to trace a surface-level technical symptom all the way down to a systemic, human root cause.
You don't just replace the 20-cent fuse. You install the metal filter. You rewrite the maintenance checklist and you retrain the mechanic. You fix the system that allowed the error to occur.
I have to play devil's advocate here as a manager. If I set my exhausted engineering team down after a massive Friday night server crash and I interrogate them by asking, "Why did you mess this up?" 5 times in a row, that is not going to lead to a harmonious culture of innovation.
That is going to devolve into the 5 blames in record time.
Right.
It's going to be a defensive witch hunt.
Your concern is completely valid, and it highlights the greatest danger of the 5 whys. If the tone of the meeting is punitive, employees will simply hide their mistakes to survive.
To implement this tool correctly, leadership must internalize and broadcast a core mantra. If a mistake slips through, shame on us as leaders for building a system that allowed it to happen.
You must aggressively separate the individual person from the flawed process. And you have to start small. You do not tackle the biggest, most emotionally charged disaster on day 1, or people will get defensive.
Pick a minor glitch, and leadership have to be radically tolerant of first-time mistakes. The IGN Entertainment case study is the perfect blueprint for this.
Tony Ford, their engineering director, inherited a toxic culture where software deployments were a terrifying ordeal. They suffered a massive meltdown where all the blog editors couldn't save their drafts, halting the company's output.
When they initiated the 5 Whys protocol, the trail of evidence led directly to a single developer who had made a reckless, unapproved software deployment late on a Friday night.
In a legacy corporate culture, that developer would have been publicly reprimanded or fired on the spot to appease the angry editors.
But Tony Ford didn't fire him. He guided the team through the remaining whys. They realized the root cause wasn't just a rogue developer acting maliciously. The root cause was a complete lack of a systemic safety net.
The engineering culture relied entirely on individual heroics and stress rather than structured, safe workflows.
So instead of a witch hunt, they instituted automated safety checks. They created a firm policy requiring high-level VP approval for any weekend deployments.
They completely removed the stress from the individual and placed the burden on the system. They even turned the debugging process into a collaborative, blameless Friday pizza party.
It built immense trust because the developers saw firsthand that leadership was obsessed with fixing the environment, not punishing the actors.
This transition from chaotic startup to structured organization brings us to the final and perhaps most difficult frontier. We have spent an hour dissecting how scrappy teams in dorm rooms and garages use these principles.
But can these agile, lean methodologies truly be applied to giant, publicly traded, established corporations?
The answer is yes, but it requires deliberate structural protection from the top down. As companies grow massive, they naturally and necessarily develop bureaucratic immune systems.
These systems, legal, compliance, HR, are designed specifically to protect the core, multi-billion-dollar cash cow products from risk. Unintentionally, these exact same immune systems will identify uncertain, risky, disruptive innovations as threats, and they will attack and kill them.
Which means, if you are the CEO of a giant corporation, you can't just tell your employees to be more innovative. You have to actually build what Ries calls innovation sandboxes.
A sandbox is a designated, heavily protected safe zone where small, cross-functional teams are given permission to run rapid, lean experiments.
But the key is containment. They test on a strictly capped percentage of real users, say 5% of the audience, so that even if the ugly baby MVP completely explodes, it will not sink the parent company's brand or bottom line.
A phenomenal illustration of corporate lean execution is Intuit's redesign of QuickBooks. QuickBooks was Intuit's flagship, multi-billion-dollar product.
But its development was trapped in an archaic, massive waterfall release cycle.
Quick time out on the jargon. A waterfall release is a rigid, cascading project management system where Phase 2 cannot begin until Phase 1 is locked in stone. You plan for 6 months, you code for 6 months, and you only discover if the customer actually likes it on launch day a year later.
Greg Wright, a product leader at Intuit, recognized this was too slow, and he spearheaded a radical shift to lean methods.
And it was incredibly painful for them at first. They tried to go fast, but the legacy infrastructure kept pulling them back into old habits. They couldn't push code quickly because a bug might destroy a small business owner's actual tax records.
So they built a literal digital sandbox, a virtualization layer. It allowed the innovation team to test new, half-baked, experimental features with real small business owners in an isolated environment without ever jeopardizing the user's actual hard financial data.
Suddenly, instead of running one giant, terrifying experiment a year, they could run 25 parallel safe experiments a week. They had corporate developers sitting in local coffee shops watching daycare owners struggle with drop-down menus in real time.
And that protected sandbox culture eventually birthed SnapTax. SnapTax was not an external company that Intuit acquired. It was built from scratch by a tiny internal 5-person team operating deep inside Intuit.
They acted entirely like a rogue startup. Through observation, they noticed that customers deeply resented the physical friction of typing data from W-2 forms into a computer.
So they built a bare-bones mobile app for California filers that simply let you snap a photograph of the W-2 with your smartphone camera to autofill the data. It was an instant, massive hit.
It was so disruptive that it directly challenged Intuit's own massive desktop software, TurboTax. But because Intuit's leadership had intentionally created a culture that protected and nurtured the sandbox, SnapTax was absorbed as a massive new mobile revenue stream, rather than being suppressed as an internal political threat.
It's a fascinating balancing act. It sounds like leadership has to simultaneously shield the fragile startup from the rigid corporation to give it room to breathe, but also deeply shield the corporation from the chaotic, fast-moving startup so it doesn't accidentally break the main cash cow.
Precisely. The true mandate of modern corporate leadership is not simply to maximize the efficiency of current profits. The goal is to manage a diverse portfolio of strategies.
You must operate the legacy cash cows with utmost efficiency and rigid Six Sigma quality control, but simultaneously, under the exact same corporate roof, you must passionately nurture the messy, highly experimental disruptors in the sandbox.
Eric Ries actually recognizes that Wall Street is currently hostile to this dual structure, which is why he proposes a radical structural solution for the future, the long-term stock exchange, or LTSE.
Because right now, Wall Street punishes visionary companies. If a CEO diverts profits away from short-term dividends to fund a risky 5-year innovation sandbox, the day traders panic, the stock tanks, and activist investors try to fire the CEO.
The LTSE proposes a brand new, SEC-approved financial exchange that specifically rewards companies for long-term vision. It demands total transparency around innovation accounting metrics rather than just vanity revenue, and it legally shields management from the whiplash of quarterly earnings reports.
It is a systemic solution to a systemic tragedy. Over the last century, we have perfected the management science of efficiently building things. But without validated learning, we are frequently building things that absolutely nobody wants.
The lean startup movement is fundamentally an ethical crusade to stop the mass squandering of human potential. It is about saving the thousands of hours, the sleepless nights, and the incredible passion poured into products that are mathematically doomed from the very start, simply because they were built on a foundation of untested assumptions.
And that reality check brings us full circle. We started this deep dive, dismantling the toxic myth of the lone genius in a hoodie who simply hallucinates a billion-dollar company.
We have replaced that myth with a rigorous toolkit. We've navigated the build, measure, learn loop. We've explored the sheer necessity of swallowing your pride and launching an ugly baby MVP. We've learned how to mathematically track actionable metrics instead of getting high on vanity metrics. We've discussed how to maximize your runway through structured pivots, how to identify your specific engine of growth, and how to scale culture using small batches and the 5 whys without devolving into the 5 blames.
The overarching lesson is that the scientific method is not confined to biology laboratories. It is the most powerful framework available for harnessing and directing human creativity.
So, to you, the listener, it does not matter if you are currently writing code to launch the next global tech empire, if you are a middle manager trying to redesign an inefficient workflow at your office, or if you're just trying to get a weekend side hustle off the ground. You can apply these scientific principles today. You do not need venture capital, and you do not need permission to start learning.
Success ultimately comes down to a willingness to aggressively test your most cherished assumptions, and possessing the profound humility to actually listen to what the cold data and your frustrated customers are telling you.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. I want you to look at the biggest, most important project sitting on your desk right now, the one you are pouring your heart, your time, and your budget into. Ask yourself, are you tracking real, validated progress, or are you just staring at the speedometer on your way off a cliff? What is the simplest, most embarrassing, ugliest, minimum viable product you could possibly launch by tomorrow morning to test if your core assumption is actually true?
It is a terrifying question to ask yourself, but answering it is the only reliable way to navigate the dark. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning your assumptions, embrace the messy reality of the sandbox, and we will catch you next time.